What you're not seeing with thyroid health. Look, we're doing a ton of work in the thyroid space, and we want to walk you through some of the key themes that we're seeing, certainly with most of the clients that we're working with in New Zealand and Australia, and what the gap is between what they're getting help with and what's being completely missed that might make a significant difference to how they look and feel, and fundamentally just getting their body back on their side. So, Mandy and I probably do a large portion of the blood work alongside Francesca from a clinical standpoint. So we get to see a lot more blood work than most coaches ever will, and we do it every single week. And once we dive into this, obviously it gives us a pretty good idea of the themes, the patterns that are coming through, what support or education gap is really coming in, and potentially from a doctor standpoint, what's getting tested on a regular basis and what's been completely missed. So I guess where I want to start, Mandy, is with this being a big focus on your side, what are they testing and what's being missed and why is that a problem?
Yeah, it's a super interesting one, and it is something that really frustrates me quite a bit, I guess, is that a lot of people are getting their bloods done, and what we see coming through is a TSH. And I've talked about this a wee bit. So TSH is your thyroid stimulating hormone. It's not a thyroid hormone at all. It is a brain messenger, and it's telling your thyroid how much hormone to make. And it's considered the kind of the gold standard for thyroid testing in the sense that it is the marker that's approved to be checked. But what I see all the time is people come through with a normal, even optimal TSH level, and so they're feeling these symptoms of maybe sluggish thyroid, whether it's inability to lose weight or feeling cold all the time, or fatigue, or stiff sore joints, or sluggish bowels, or there can be so many different things when it comes to thyroid, right? Um, and they're like, oh, well, I've had my thyroid checked and it's fine, so it's not that. And I'm like, show me your thyroid markers. And when we look at them, it's just the TSH that's been tested. And so the gap there really is that all of the actual thyroid hormone markers aren't being tested. More and more, I would say, I am seeing sometimes that T4 hormone being tested, which is the first inactive thyroid hormone. But even that doesn't tell us the full story. So when we do bloods for clients and we're actually looking at thyroid markers, we're sort of looking at that T3 as well, and maybe even antibodies, and really getting kind of a good overview of that full thyroid hormone cascade to really see where the issue is. So yeah, number one, my frustration there is really that there's this myopic focus on TSH being the marker that tells everything, when really it's the marker that tells the least about what's going on with your thyroid function.
Yeah, and I think there's a nice separation between where we give GPs a bit of grief and where it's just there, it's out of scope, right? And when we're talking about a couple of things we'll talk about today of what you can control, nutrition, exercise, and otherwise, it's certainly not covered, and we'd like it to be at least discussed a little bit more from a GP in order to say there's a couple other things that absolutely have a huge impact that I'd like you to at least look at, but it's outside of scope. But from a GP perspective of what they could control, they'll understand the difference between, the messenger versus the hormone, and yet it just that next step is not being taken. And I think being able to lean into certain symptoms that come through, I think the one thing that we can control on this call rather than just complaining what's being missed is the ownership and ability to direct your own health plan through pushing for the tests that we need to get done in order to get the full panel. And I think we're certainly seeing a huge transition in the audience total of not just taking everything the doctor says as fact, but rather making sure that we do get the full picture.
Mm.
But again, not demonizing the doctor as being the enemy here. But if they're being a bit lazy, it's quite annoying. And I think seeing that that's coming through more so in the thyroid space than in most of the areas that we look at. We've worked with some fantastic doctors, and there's plenty that have pleasantly surprised us in certain areas to really go the extra mile. But the thyroid as an overall space is the one that typically is more underserved. And we're seeing clients that 5, 10, 15 years on certain medications never really getting to the bottom of symptoms or just getting pushed away that thyroid isn't the issue. But as you said, if we dig a little bit more, we might find a bit more.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I don't like people to think that we're bagging on doctors because they are working within restrictions within their system. So
Yeah.
there's things that they can't change about what they can do. But it's really nice from a client perspective or from the people listening here to be able to have that understanding of what could be worth checking, so that either one, they can have a conversation with the doctor to say, have we thought of checking this? Is this something you can do for me? And I actually had this with a lady the other day where she had some markers done but not all, and I said, her doctor was, quite helpful, and I said, why don't you just ask her, is this able to be checked? And the doctor's like, well, it's not typically what I do, but she, approved it for her and we got it done. And then also knowing that there's usually options to be able to get that self-request it and get it tested for yourself if the doctor is a blank no for you. So it's kind of just I guess from the people listening perspective, know that it's worth digging a little bit more and not just kind of getting a no, that's all we test, because there probably is more that can be done.
100%. So let's look at a couple of things you can control, because the fundamental part we're looking at here is one, if you're seeing the symptoms, then let's trust that instinct and dig a bit more to at least get some numbers so that we can make sure that that's not just a gap that we've missed. And if a gap in our knowledge or our view, we're going to be in the same spot of just guessing, what comes next.
Mm.
Once we know that, okay, we're not just looking at TSH, we can see that this is potentially a suppression in this hormone, a lack of conversion in this hormone, something's not working right. The component here is, okay, what do we do about it? Now, in some cases, the addition of certain medications of course being necessary at the time or quite helpful, but there's all the other stuff that on a call we can fix in the matter of days, if not weeks, through some adjustments in how they're fueling the body. Exercise, I think, is a hugely overlooked part of this thyroid function. And then there's a general overall lifestyle design that we'll tend to address as well. So nutritionally, I want to look at this first. And I think the key part that you really push, and we've talked about a lot in our videos, is how responsive that thyroid function is to nutrition changes. And I think in both exercise and nutrition, it's played a similar role, is when you're volatile or at the extremes, that's where the thyroid really starts to get a limitation. And I think over dieting, under fueling, all of that stuff is where we see quite a strong correlation with that thyroid too.
Yeah, it's super interesting, right? There often there's this hand-in-hand scenario where someone's perhaps wanting to lose weight, and so they've got this long history of dieting. And then they also have this low thyroid function. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Probably it was a situation where the thyroid was functioning fine. Then there's been this chronic dieting and underfueling, and the body's response to that is to turn down that metabolic rate and turn down that thyroid function. And I've seen this in a really acute scenario where someone's, say, done a big event or something over a weekend, and perhaps they're under recovered. And if you test their thyroid markers, then it looks like they have low thyroid function. But actually, they've got good thyroid function. It's the body's response to the output that has been accumulated over a short term. And if you think about that in the short term and then extrapolate that out over years of dieting and years of going through like these fitness classes and stuff like that, and then under fueling, you can see how the thyroid is actually there's nothing wrong with the thyroid. The thyroid's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's turning everything down so that you can recover. But you're feeling it as the sluggish function. And so I think the nutrition piece is super important when you know, okay, there is some sluggish thyroid function here, we do need to support it. I would always look at total fuel intake for the individual, because especially if they've got a weight loss goal, they're likely restricting on some level. And so actually checking, are we fueling the thyroid so that your body can upregulate that function again? And that's not just caloric value total, but protein obviously being key, how we're timing the carbohydrates, fat intake, all of the different pieces.
Yeah, and I think you've highlighted a key part of this, which is when we look at thyroid. The reason we look at thyroid function so much at the moment is it's such a vehicle to highlight how holistic it needs to be, right? Like you can't just fix it through just looking at nutrition and realizing that you're stressing out all day, or feeling like you're eating healthy, but the whole time you're chronically exercising or you're not moving at all, right? Like all of this is going to play a role. And I think that's, on my side, has been a huge push in the communication of at least understanding thyroid function a bit more. Is one, we obviously need to move a little bit more, but the type of movement you do is super helpful. And for the people that we're talking to on a regular basis, they're not lazy. They're typically quite driven. They're usually wanting to really make a change in their body. But if they're pushing the spin classes and the long runs and the whatever other chronic stress is being brought in from a physical exercise aspect, they can usually be suppressing stuff way more, right? And they go, my thyroid is the issue, my thyroid is the issue. But really, it's as you said, it's responding the right way, but we're just forcing against a body that's not responding anything like it used to. So again, which one's the problem? I think it's more of the link between the two and actually listening to the shift that needs to be had, certainly in the short term. And I think we talk about this plenty from a seasonal standpoint. It doesn't mean we're we can't run or we can't do these activities we want that might stress the body out a little bit. It's that resilience or that bounce back impact of like, can we really show up again tomorrow? And I
Mm.
had a really interesting discussion actually with someone yesterday, Mandy, of, oh, I know you don't like running, Ollie. I'm like, no, no, we get tons of clients in our program that love their running. We just make sure that we do it in a slightly different way so their body doesn't break in the process.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a seasonal aspect of, yes, there may be an occasion where we strip back the total volume for a little bit, rebuild back that level of resilience, and then we can go again, right? And
Mm.
we've got at least a handful of clients getting ready for half marathons, marathons, or even ultras at this point. It's not something we push or make you do if you don't want to. But if that's your goal, I'm not going to change the goal. I want to get your body to the point that you want to do the things that you want to do. And I think that's the fundamental shift. Like if there's one big anchor in that approach to health is that we're not taking something away. We're trying to give you the best life you have by having a body that's on your side. And I think if running is part of that for you, let's just be a bit more strategic. And I think, yeah, that's where, at least a tangent I've had a lot of discussions on recently.
Yeah, I think that the exercise piece when it comes to thyroid function or low thyroid function is super interesting because it usually goes to the two extremes. One is that people are really full sending it with all the things and trying to do all the things and feeling like they're struggling.
Yeah.
And in those cases, it is often a discussion of let's pull back for a time and get things feeling awesome again first so that you can go into that and actually do it and maintain your performance. But the other end of it is that thyroid, because every single cell in your body has a receptor for thyroid hormone, the effects of low thyroid hormone are felt everywhere. There is no part of your body that doesn't feel the effects if your thyroid hormone is low. So everything from muscle ability to contract your muscles, how your muscles recover after exercise, so even fatigue post exercise, but also joints, that frozen joints, sore joints, stiff joints, etc. That's a real common low thyroid symptom. And so if you've been battling this low thyroid function for quite a long time, the desire to go and exercise could be quite low because you might go and do it and it might make you feel worse. You might actually feel sore for longer afterwards and feel a bit stiffer after because you don't have that kind of ability to recover. But the ironic thing is that in order to get the thyroid functioning well again, we need to be moving. So we need to get that blood flow to the joints and we need to be getting that sensitivity to thyroid hormone being increased by muscle contraction. So it's very much a discussion with those people of how can we bring in some movement in a way that allows you to crack through that layer and then continue to build from it so that you can get back that enjoyment of doing the things you used to do. That's it's kind of those two ends that I see, the pullback people and the ones that, come on, we've got to just do a little bit to get things moving.
Yeah. And I think this highlights that you can scroll free advice forever, but until you have trust in the process of some sort of plan that you can follow for an extended period of time. I think being able to, it's that funny balance between trusting your intuition that something's wrong, so you make a change, but
Mm.
once you make the change, the first signal that you get may not be necessarily something to listen to, right? And we've actually seen this quite regularly, where the body's had a bit of a freak out. We're trying to support liver function or repair thyroid function in some form, and you're like, "Oh, I don't feel that good," and you're like, "You're
Mm.
day two, trust the process, give the 7 days," and we see that sort of fourth, fifth, sixth day get better and better and better. And without a little bit of support in your corner, at least a confidence in that process, that can be really challenging to get through. So, just before we continue on this, if this is something you're like, oh, golly, I actually haven't dived into this yet, or I want to get rid of some of that guesswork, one of the things that we're doing more and more of is the blood work. Whether you've either had blood work done with a GP recently, or you're being pushing for tests and you've never got the answers or get the test done, send me either a message on Instagram or an email and just write blood work reset. And I'll send you through an example of exactly what we're doing for clients. And this is your option of getting a sneak peek of what this looks like with our private clients and actually getting a specialist test done. And let's get rid of some of that guesswork, the extra random supplements you're bringing in that you hope is going to do something, or second guessing the effort you're putting in. If you want to get that deep dive into some level of your own personal biomarkers, then yeah, send me that message. More than happy to help. Where this shows up, I think overall, is obviously that the chicken or the egg is always a very interesting one with thyroid function. And what we're trying to highlight is that we've talked about this plenty of times. The hormones that we have in our body, whether sex hormones, whether thyroid function or anything else, they are simply a receptor to what else is happening in that environment, right? So if you are someone who is unregulated in some form, you're stressing out all day, you're unfortunately in a home environment that you don't want to be in, or there's a crazy work project that you've been burning the candle from both ends. Thyroid function is going to be one of those markers that we see that indicates some level of stress. And I think there's this confidence in your body to say it's actually doing what it's supposed to because I'm putting myself in a stressful environment is actually a really important thing to bring up, because I think we also run into the risk of doing this if there's a over pathologizing of thyroid function as the problem.
Mm.
Whereas, as you just addressed before, and I think I want to double down on, is that if we love our body, we respect our body, we know it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. We no longer fight it like it's the enemy, and we start to realize that actually we just haven't been looking after this thing recently, or we haven't been doing it the right way, and we just don't know what the right steps are for this age and stage of life. And I think
Mm.
if we shift that, we move from what actually is a little bit too close for victim mentality for my liking to something that comes back to a little bit more curiosity based. If there must be something I'm missing here, and I'm really looking forward to finding it out. And I think that's worth bringing up because with the amount of blood work calls we've done, we have some very long discussions around this to discuss the presentation of particular data. And if you
Mhm.
say something is bad, one person goes, "Oh, good, I found a problem as to why I'm stuck." And the other person goes, "Oh, damn, I don't think I'll ever be able to change. And now I am stuck here forever." Right. And both of
Mhm.
those are very unhelpful.
Yeah.
The person we love working with is, I'm glad we've found some data here. And I'm really excited to see how much better we can feel once I've made some changes. And I think
Mm.
the ownership of one, the things you can control, but two, that auditing of your language around the pathologizing of some symptom, whatever it is, thyroid, gut, whatever you're following this for,
Mhm.
is a really, really important part of not becoming your own worst enemy around where those health concerns are coming through.
Wow, that's such a good point. I love that too. That reframing it, if your thyroid function is a bit slow, asking the question why,
Mhm.
rather than being like, you are now a victim of your thyroid. And I hear this a lot, and it's totally just the language we use, but I think it should be challenged where we claim the diagnosis, we claim the problem as our own, like my thyroid is the problem, rather than the things that I've been doing in my body and my environment have impacted my thyroid, and my thyroid is merely responding to those in the way that it should in order to keep me safe. um, that changes the whole thing, right? Because then we can actually be like, actually, I'll change what I'm doing, and then my thyroid's going to respond differently. And this is the cool thing that I love about working with people with thyroid issues is that if we leave the autoimmune process out of it, that is
Mhm.
its own section, and it's still very responsive to nutrition and lifestyle changes. But if we just look at thyroid function without out that, the thyroid responds amazingly well and quite quickly to changes. So I often, when I'm talking to someone, if I've looked at their thyroid markers and whatnot, we can see those sluggish symptoms coming through. We can see the markers are low. I'll give them some very targeted things to do for even just the next 3 months, nutrition things, movement things, and some supplemental support. And then we'll retest in a couple of months. And always, there's usually an improvement in energy and symptoms, and the markers tend to follow. And if they don't, that's when we can look a little bit deeper. But I would say, even with the ones where there is an autoimmune component, so Hashimoto's or Graves or any of those sorts of things, they're also really responsive to the things we do. We just have to do slightly different things because we're addressing an immune response rather than just a thyroid response.
Yeah, I was gonna address that, right? Because there's going to be someone up in arms being like, "Well, this is autoimmune condition. It's not going to move that quickly."
Mm.
But I've also been incredibly impressed with quite a few of the ladies I've talked to recently that have had Hashimoto's and their ownership of what she can control, right, or they can control. And I
Yeah.
think being able to address that component of, again, you've been dealt a set of cards. If you respond to it poorly, this only gets worse. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's a nice way to manage things because, again, the one of the big strengths of being able to work with a number of clients we do is that we've always got a fantastic example of someone who's just crushing it when they're being dealt a bad set of cards, right? And I
Mm.
think it's always reinforced to me that you can take ownership of what's in your control. And if you think it's hard, I can give you an example of someone who's choosing to see the things they can control, right? And it's not downplaying that you're in pain or suffering or anything, but it is being able to say the longer you spend in that scenario saying, I poor me, the less time you're spending saying, how can I fix this? Right. And I think
Yeah.
that's been a really nice shift and actually just a positive, surprisingly positive observation I've had recently from just the people we've worked with. And I think typically they're people that want to fix stuff, right? So they're here to get some help and they don't want to be the obstacle getting in the way. And I think we've both seen clients where that's been the case. We've given them all the solutions, but they are actually the obstacle. And being able to attack that self-dialogue in
Mm,
any health pursuit, or probably any health pursuit, any pursuit entirely,
mm,
is how am I talking to myself through this process, and what does challenge say about me? Am I going to lean
mm,
into it, make it a character building experience, or am I going to let it break me and go backwards and show this is where the problem came from?
mm,
And actually, it's kind of separate. It was more of a mental obstacle we were overcoming here, Mandy, but a cool discussion that's become quite prominent recently around challenge has been, is this obstacle or event going to make you the hero or the villain? And
mm,
the reason this comes up is uh, it was described as, if you look at any movie, the hero and the villain usually have the same story. They just chose to look at it differently in regards to, I am this way because, and I'm this way because I couldn't be the opposite, right? And I think being able to use that as a really strong reminder of, like, shit happens to everyone, how you reframe that story as being something that builds you and makes you better or keeps you in that spot is entirely up to you, right? And I think that's when it comes to these limitations and challenges in our health, or something that's being sprung up on you and is much different than before,
mm.
well, it's just another opportunity to ask that question.
Yeah, and it's tricky, right? Because we've had quite a few people where they've been feeling quite rubbish for a number of years, and then they've come in, we've done full testing that's never been done before, and
Hmm.
it's kind of like, okay, there's actually an autoimmune condition here.
Yep.
I can fully appreciate that at the time of discovery, that's actually quite confronting because
Yes.
you're like, oh, this is something, a whole new challenge that I didn't even know that I was going to have to deal with. And for anything hard like that, there is a process that our brain has to go through of that kind of alarm first and being a bit worried about it and panic, and then kind of, all of those different steps. But if you can get through that process to the point of actually, there's something we can do here, and we are seeing, we've got heaps of people in the program where thyroid antibodies have been through the roof, like full-blown Hashimoto's going on, and those markers are coming down, 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 and they're feeling better in the process. Or I think another really good example is actually, Ollie, different but good. Our client spotlight from a mastery call the other night, Tracy, super cool lady. She has had fibromyalgia for a very long time, which is also an autoimmune condition that is kind of really characterized by pain throughout the body. And her big thing, which I love her for, is that she continues to strength train every day, regardless of how she feels, because she knows that the outcome on the other side is that she feels better for it. And another lady in that same group who has psoriatic arthritis, another condition very much associated with a lot of kind of chronic pain, the same mentality. And I think this is the piece that where the obstacle is the way, right? That the thing is there and it is a challenge that we have to work through. But if you can push through and find a way around, there is actually some real gold on the other side of that. There's resilience that comes up, and you do feel so much better for it quite quickly. So it is, allow yourself that time to have that panic, but then be like, right, how are we going to work around this?
Yeah. So what started as an initial focus on the thyroid stuff, I guess we've intentionally spent less time on finger pointing here of saying markers are not being tested. I think there's an ownership aspect of, if you want to get stuff tested, let's push for it. But there's all these other aspects that you can control that allow that thing to change quicker than you think. And I think being able to see that if something is being wrong for a really long time, first get some stats behind it and really locate the problem. Let's do a big push on that, and we can certainly help you get there. But then there's all of these other aspects of, just regardless of whether it's thyroid or anything other challenge-wise, I think there's a deeper discussion here that we kind of tangented to, but I quite like.
Mhm.
We've done so many trainings on thyroid function, what parts of exercise, what parts of nutrition, general modalities that you can really focus on to see a really nice improvement. But if you don't first tackle that discussion of something that's been labeled upon you, or something that you see now as a health challenge that didn't show up before, but now it's really become front of mind, just check yourself on whether that's become the entire focus or the things that you can control about it. So hopefully you still find that relevant, and regardless of whether this is a thyroid discussion or not for you, hopefully it keeps a and reinforced loop of the controllables and the ability a bit more intelligent around your efforts or where they're spent, because we have seen far too many people that are incredibly driven and their body doesn't show it because they've not stopped to ask the question, am I focusing on the right stuff? I'm just putting in more and more effort and actually going backwards. So there's a lot to be said there, and many different avenues we can go down. But from a thyroid space, we're significantly we're really enjoying it. We're seeing a huge impact in the people we're talking to. We're getting a lot of thank yous, because we're getting answers that not just like 6 months, like people haven't got for like a decade or more. So there's been some really nice ripple effects on that, and it's only enforced or reinforced our refinement and focus of that integration of all three, right? Digestive, physical, and psychological, whether that be menopause, whether that rebuilding from injury, whether that be any other health concern that we're working with, and likely relevant for you as well. So hope you're having an amazing week, team. Audit that self-dialogue and make sure you're being the hero, not the villain. And I think you've been in a much better spot.